I want Americans to be engaged with the world. I want Americans to be shaping our relationship with countries around the world, win elections, understand how we got to this place, and make sense of the world, and make sense of the world in the most expansive, broad way as possible. Because I think as Americans, we need to be talking to each other a lot more than we currently are, and that will help us become a stronger country.
Hey everyone, it's Tamara Thompson with Broadcast Your Authority, and I'm super excited for our next guest. But first, I'm going to have our co-host Corey Gladwell introduce him.
Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, our guest today, I had a whole long list of, of amazing titles. A policy entrepreneur, consultant, soon-to-be best-selling author, Joel Rubin. There was so many things we discussed and talked about in background. I want to pass it to you because I think it not only in the political space, the history you have, the skills you have, but in the business side and consulting and helping people get to the level they want to with partnerships and relationships. And but I'll pass it to you because you'll do a much better job of telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Sure, Corey. It's great to be with you and with the panel as well. I appreciate you putting me in this chair to be able to talk about why we need to understand the world and how the world is evolving right now in front of us. I've been working in Washington for nearly 3 decades on foreign policy on Capitol Hill, at the State Department, in Republican administrations, Democratic administrations. I've run for office, been an activist and advocate, tried to communicate on television as well, on breaking news topics, on what's happening. And I believe it's crucial for the American people to know where we are right now in the world. And that's why I wrote the book, because if we can't make sense of the world, we can't know how to navigate in that world. We can't know how to have an effective business. We can't know how to have effective policies. We can't tell our children where the country is going and where it's heading. And so I believe these experiences are ones that I'd like to share, and I am sharing them through this, of course, your generous platform, but also in a book format, because I believe people need to understand that there is a big picture that is common and central to all of us as Americans. It's not necessarily partisan. And there's a language about what it means to be a patriotic American, a pragmatic American, someone who cares about the future of the country. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the book as well. And I think for business people and entrepreneurs, they'll find it very helpful in understanding the moment we're in right now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we were talking about earlier is there's such... there's almost like this big space that a lot of people feel, especially business owners feel, between policy and their small business or their medium-sized business or even their company when it comes to whether it's immigration or it's something with tariffs or it's something with taxes. Right. The tax code changes. And if you don't know everything or to read the 5,000 page, new bill that comes through and how that affects you, how can you grow your business? What can you invest in? What is going to penalize you? There's so much of that. So what is some of the ways that you come to a business owner or you come to someone you do consulting with and be able to help them navigate this what feels like sometimes chaos of a world with policy? Yeah.
Corey, I like to say that if you're reading about it in the newspaper, you're already too late. When it comes to decisions that are made by the president, for example, that are foreign policy related, like the H-1B visa decision that he put out a couple of weeks ago, that affects businesses. Now, all of a sudden, it will cost $100,000 to get an expert in on H-1B rather than $400. But that didn't just happen overnight. That happened over months. That happened behind the scenes. That happened in engagements with Congress. There were business people in the room discussing it. So if you're a business person and you need an H-1B visa expert and you don't know about that happening, and then you see it in the news, forget it. You're gone. You have lost your competitive advantage. There are already other companies who knew that was coming, who have lined up who they want to bring in and figured out their financing so they won't lose market share. And so that's part of it. Understanding how Washington works is not just a cliche. It's actually directly business related. Tariffs, for example, dozens of countries around the world now have tariffs placed on them by President Trump. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean for their business? What do they need to understand? Are the efforts being made behind the scenes to change them, reduce them potentially? That's the kind of work that I engage in Washington. It's sort of anticipating the marketplace as being formed by the policymakers. And I think it's just the best way to ensure that when it comes to how Washington works, you're not getting run over by Washington, but you're shaping it and gaining market share and competitive advantage as a result.
Why do you think that, why is it essential for business leaders to really understand this connection? Because I believe probably even several people listening to this show right now have probably never even thought about this topic, really.
Yeah. Look, Tamara, you can't avoid the federal government. We all live with it.
We pay taxes.
We pay taxes. We have a military. There's social security benefits. There's 20% of our economy, roughly the GDP, is spent by the federal government. So it's part and parcel of our daily lives. And then these issues come up, policy issues, tariffs, H-1B visas, maybe the war in Ukraine. And all of a sudden there's the question about critical minerals. And are there companies in the United States that are interested in that? It's just an essential component of everything that we do as Americans. And in many ways, it's not partisan. That's the little secret of Washington, is that most of the things that actually get done because people are working together across party lines. I wrote this book. It's about how Democrats can win again on foreign policy. And I wrote it because I believe there's a crisis in the Democratic Party on foreign policy and how to think about it and talk about it and engage the world. And I wanted to speak to that audience, but also speak to the broader roots that shaped and informed me as a policy practitioner. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, for example, after college, that had bipartisan support for generations. It's that bipartisanship that made us a strong agency that supported my service overseas. And that's also how things actually get done in Washington. So speaking to Democrats, using language that's accessible to the broader community in the United States that will make people be interested in a foreign policy vision that serves them, that's crucial. Because, and I'll add this, people don't like to be blindsided. And we don't like a foreign policy where there's like one person by fiat making up decisions. And that's very abnormal for the policymaking process. But I don't think it's a permanent situation. That said, if there's no opposition, in this case, Democratic Party, that's providing alternative ideas, that will be the norm. And President Trump will do the foreign policy the way he's choosing to do it. And that puts businesses at a greater risk because that makes it harder for them to understand the process, the Congress, the laws, what's going on behind the scenes. Different incentives come in, different ways to gain access come in rather than the traditional democratic ways that we do it with the what we call it, the small d, the American democracy part. And so I think it's very important that businesses also understand how important it is that people work across party lines in Washington as they navigate for their companies.
I love that.
Joel, I've had the great pleasure of getting to know you a little bit over the last 24 hours. I find you to be a wildly intelligent and insightful guy.
My mom will be happy.
I'd love to know because, there are entrepreneurs from all over North America that are affected by policy decisions that most of us, myself included, completely blind about. So apart from, hiring you as a consultant, obviously, which I think most people should take a look at in this regard, like how can entrepreneurs from around the continent and even the globe anticipate these political risks that could, affect their businesses?
Well, I hate to use the word, but I'll use it. In Washington, the key word is relationships. And the key word is knowing who to call and understanding it. There's sort of a formal structure that is in every textbook, at least I hope in every textbook, about the Congress and the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then there's the informal way that they do their work. Now, I served in the Senate as a national security advisor to a couple of senators. And then when I was in the Obama administration, I was our senior liaison to the House of Representatives for the Secretary of State, Secretary Kerry. So I've worked across both of those chambers, as well as within the executive branch, who interacts with those chambers. That's a lot of gobbledygook. You know what the real truth is? Calling up people who sit in leadership or on the key committees that have the access to information and the power to do something with that information. So that's what I can do as a businessman and as a consultant. And that's what the effective ones do, which is to provide awareness and information, call it political intelligence, but a clarity about what is happening on the issues that you care about, what is happening in the sector that you're passionate about, that you're working in, who are the people then that we need to talk to and help to shape the ideas and the thinking behind the scenes. But it's not just that, Lee. It's also then what do you say in public? What do you do with the media? What's your strategy? Do you write an op-ed? Do you go on TV? who are your validators? Who are the people that you speak with that can help carry that message? There's a sort of a triangular relationship in Washington between the executive branch, the congressional, and the outside advocacy and media environment. How do you, sitting in the middle, connect those dots? And that's what I. That's what
tremendous
I
value.
That's
tremendous
great.
value.
Yeah.
And you do that really well. So you're positioned the media really well. You've started Substack. You have like great presence online. You have a podcast at this point too. So I think that's really important. Could you share a couple of stories of some of the people that you've come in to help serve on your consultancy side?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll do it. Even just last week, I organized a meeting where at the United Nations. So the United Nations had their General Assembly meetings last week in New York, which meant that all governments sent their president or prime minister and foreign minister to New York to give speeches and do diplomacy. What people don't realize that they do a lot of diplomacy outside of the United Nations in that roundtable where we see the plenary and the speeches. In fact, that's where most of the work is done, behind the scenes. Just like in your business, it's not at the corporate board meeting, it's all the other stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so they meet. And so I set up a meeting with a foreign minister of Serbia with leaders of the Jewish community to talk about what was happening, not just in Israel and Gaza, but also the war in Ukraine, what's happening in the American Jewish community, what the Serbian government should be aware of. They shared and exchanged ideas. And I did on behalf of a client, Serbian government in this case, because I felt it was very important for them to be able to hear from Jewish leaders in the United States who are also connected to issues that matter to Serbia, like Israel, which is one of the top three munitions provider, or Serbia is one of the top three munitions providers to Israel. Very important allies. So getting that together, connecting those dots, and then seeing opportunities potentially down the road for them to cement their relationship. That's just one tiny example. Now the question is, what do we do with that? There's a lot that we can do with that. I'm not going to lay it out here, but there's a lot that we can do to help accelerate that relationship and strengthen the United States as a result.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's one of the things people usually think that there is this only the big, huge companies have access to someone like yourself. You know, like you have to have this multi-billion-dollar corporation, and then you can find someone like you to be on your team or hire as a consultant and work with you. But that's not the case. Like there's access and availability and help that you can provide to businesses and executives at all different levels. And I think it's important for people to realize that.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Corey, the relationships that enabled us to organize the meeting were built over 25 plus years of work. Mm-hmm. And in Washington, one of the things we don't do well, which would probably bother Lee, being that he understands how to essentially digitize or put numbers behind every action. We don't put numbers behind every action typically. And so I remember once I had a client who they wanted to charge me by the hour for work. And okay, what does that mean exactly? Well, can you make a couple of phone calls and we'll bill you for that hour of work? And I'm thinking that hour of work probably was like hundreds of hours of relationship building.
That's
so
it.
I charge you for the hundreds or for the one? And I said, I'm not going to do any of it. Thank you. No, thank you. And so that is part of it. And what you want to find in people who are working in the Washington space is folks who are both credible and have access and also have opinions. You know, I think one of the things we need to shy away from or stay away from is we should not be muting ourselves, but you do it in a way that is inclusive. And so when in public comms, like when I go on television, I go on to a conservative outlet, maybe it's Fox or maybe it's Newsmax, and I'm clearly a Democrat. I speak in language that I hope their audience will accept, and I get asked back on. So I'm trying to make a point that I believe is accessible to the audience, and that's the secret sauce, and that's based on experience more than anything, and lots of trial and lots of failure, and hopefully occasionally a couple of successes along the way as well.
It's amazing.
Joel, when you mentioned a bit of everything happening behind the scenes and people who have the power to influence you, how would you say domestic interest groups and constituencies influence the foreign policy decisions?
Yeah, Judy, I think it's central. It has been historically central. So to unpack that a bit, in foreign affairs, there's narrow interest groups that tend to be very passionate about particular countries. In domestic affairs, we have broad swaths of the economy that are oftentimes affected. And so it's not as discrete. So for example, Cuba policy, there's a large Cuban American population sitting in New Jersey, sitting in Florida. They're very passionate. They'll raise funds for politicians running for office. They'll go and lobby and advocate. And you'll see oftentimes positions that reflect that community's goals being taken by the members from New Jersey and Florida. Same in the Jewish community, similar advocacy for Israel and in the Palestinian American community as well. But you see discrete communities of interest really leading the way. And I think that's important to understand, not as a nefarious activity, but as a legal activity of Americans who care deeply about something happening around the world. I view it as a positive because I want Americans to be engaged with the world. I want Americans to be shaping our relationship with countries around the world. I don't want it to just be someone who got elected making up their own mind on what's best. We're all Americans. In a thriving democracy, we should all be able to shape the policy of our government. So as an American who's passionate about something overseas, if it's a country in Africa, if it's a country in Latin America, it doesn't matter. You should get out there and use your voice. And now bringing that into the business frame, what's intriguing about that is that there are activist groups that tend to historically lobby or advocate on behalf of that issue. But I think there's much more in terms of bilateral relations that we can do where we can deepen the relationships. So in the case of Israel, there are a lot of economic ties now between Israel and the United States that are in many ways an outgrowth of that strong relationship between the Jewish community and Israel. And I think that strengthens the United States overall, because when we have dynamic trade between two countries, it's not just limited to that subset of that group. It can potentially expand to benefit a variety of Americans. So it's always fun. And it's more fun. I'll just be blunt. It's more fun when you have people who are deeply passionate about another place in the world and want to advocate and make a difference in that relationship.
Love that. Love that. You want to tell us about your book? Upcoming.
You know, the upcoming book is titled "Making Sense of the World," and I title it because I, quite frankly, think we need to make sense of the world right now, and nobody owns the exact language for how we need to understand the world. It's a very diverse dynamic. I'll come back to this, but I'm right now on a text thread with someone who he and I are debating about the meaning of the president's Israel-Palestine policy he put out yesterday, the 20-point plan on it. And he and I are debating. We should have that debate. We should try to understand. He has a different view from me on it. That's how you make sense of the world. So in the book, what I try to do is I try to use my 25 plus years of experience of Washington and working across party lines in different nodes of DC and having served and worked overseas to try to explain, here's how things have evolved to the point that they're in now. And as a Democrat, because I'm making recommendations to the Democratic Party in a narrow sense, that we need to be more patriotic. We need to be more populist. And we also need to be very pragmatic in the way we do our policy. And that will attract people, that will attract voters, which ultimately, and this is the key point, ultimately foreign policy is made by people who are in an elected position. And the key word is elected. You can have all the ideas in the world, but if you don't win the election, it kind of doesn't matter. And in particular in foreign policy, because there's such authority in the president as the commander in chief. So we got to win elections as Democrats. And you don't win elections just by speaking to your own and going deeper into your own. You lose elections that way. You win elections by expanding the pie, by bringing in people who are floating between parties and just want to see good things happen for the United States. And so that's also the mindset that I have in the book, which is win elections, understand how we got to this place, and make sense of the world, and make sense of the world in the most expansive, broad way as possible. Because I think as Americans, we need to be talking to each other a lot more than we currently are. And that will help us become a stronger country.
I'm curious if you're going to bring that text debate over to your podcast. Because the podcast
Maybe
is
I
the
will.
same name as
You
the
know
book.
what?
That's it.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. So the name of the podcast relates to the name of the book and everything else that you're going on with consultancy and things like that. So yeah, I was curious if you're going to bring that over there and what types of
good idea.
Content. Yes, let's
That's what
go.
she's here
I'm gonna
for.
listen to that one. So yeah, I was curious on that side, like, because you have the show too. Like, is there a main focus that just fully aligns with the book, or are you going to bring in other types of conversations on the podcast?
So one of the podcast is called Making Sense of the World. One of my goals with this is to bring in top line people who have served in government and elsewhere as key heavy hitters in policy,
of course,
and to give them an audience to talk for like half an hour, 40 minutes, not to be relegated to 3 or 4 minutes of commentary, which is again a really wonderful thing, but to really explain what it is that they are thinking so that they can be accessible, right? Like the goal here is to make foreign policy accessible to Americans who don't think about this on every single day, but who want to know and want to be informed. And not just by people who have opinions, and I don't mean this in a critical way, but I want people who have opinions who also have served in the roles where they know where they come from a place of educated experience. So for example, recently we had on a woman, Rose Gottemoeller, and Rose was the negotiator for the New START nuclear accord with Russia, was our top arms control official under President Obama, and was the number 2 at NATO under President Trump. Rose is really good. She knows, she speaks in ways that I think the American people should hear. But I also want to go a little deeper, which is to make sure that people understand that they're not faceless gray bureaucrats. They're real people. So Rose is a woman in national security, a pioneer in that space. So I wanted to hear a little more about that as well and share that with people. So that helps us to understand how the world works in Washington. So yes, it is a bit of a balancing with the idea of being a consultant, but I'm finding a really positive response to the guests who do want to come on and speak to a broader audience because they understand what a critical moment we're in right now.
I love that. I think that's so important. And I'm excited to listen to more of your show as well.
Thanks, Amber.
Joel, could you share with our audience a little bit more how they can connect with you on social media, your podcast, with your book coming out, and all the things that they need to know about you?
Yeah. So Tamara, I'll tell you right now, I've got a few different platforms where I post my work. I've got a Substack called The Briefing Book, which you can find online. It's now a bestseller on Substack. I'm also promoting the podcast, the Making Sense of the World, on the Siren Network on Substack. And then I'm on Twitter, Joel Martin Rubin, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, a few different platforms. So those are the platforms, the primary ones, the Substack and the podcast, where I'd really be honored to have people subscribe and join. And then hopefully when the book comes out, you'll also buy that as well and get into our discussions more. And hopefully it will help you make sense of the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joel, for joining us today. We truly appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And those of you who are watching, definitely check out his podcast. Definitely check out his book when it's launched. We'll make sure we have everything in the show notes and the descriptions. Follow him on social media. Say hello. He's an awesome guy. And we'll definitely subscribe to our channel as well. Broadcast Your Authority. Listen to us on Apple or Spotify. And we'll see you in the next episode.